$5 million? Amanda Collins said with a short laugh that carried farther than it should have. Ma'am, people don't just walk in here and withdraw that kind of money. The words landed like a spotlight inside the private client lounge of Crescent National Bank at exactly 10:12 on a bright Tuesday morning in downtown Charlotte. Conversation slowed. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. A few heads turned. Amanda stood behind a polished walnut desk, her posture straight, her smile thin, her eyes fixed on the woman seated across from her. Victoria Brooks didn't react. She sat quietly in a navy cashmere sweater, dark jeans, and simple black flats. No designer handbag, no jewelry worth mentioning, no entourage. Nothing about her appearance matched what Amanda expected a multi-million-dollar client to look like. And that was exactly why the room had become so quiet. Amanda picked up the withdrawal request again, as if reading it a second time might somehow change the number. $5 million. She shook her head. There has to be a mistake. Victoria folded her hands calmly on the desk. There isn't. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. That seemed to irritate Amanda even more. People in the lounge exchanged glances. A retired attorney near the window lowered his newspaper. A young couple waiting for an appointment stopped talking altogether. The tension in the room wasn't loud yet. It was worse. It was building. Amanda leaned back in her chair and studied Victoria from head to toe. Can you explain why someone like you needs immediate access to that amount of money? The question hung in the air. Someone like you. The phrase wasn't subtle. It never was. Victoria looked at Amanda for a moment. She had heard those words before. Different cities, different buildings, different faces. Same message, same assumption. She could feel the attention of the room shifting toward her, waiting to see how she would respond. Instead of arguing, she simply asked, "Are you refusing the transaction?" Amanda glanced toward another banker across the room before answering. "I'm saying this request raises concerns." Her tone had changed. More official, more confident. The kind of confidence people borrow when they believe nobody will challenge them. A white man standing near the espresso station chuckled under his breath. $5 million, he muttered. Sure. A few uncomfortable smiles appeared around the room. Victoria heard every word. She remained still. The lounge itself seemed to tighten around her. The marble floors, the soft lighting, the expensive furniture, none of it felt luxurious anymore. It felt like a stage. Amanda tapped the paperwork with a manicured finger. Before we go any further, we're going to need additional verification. Victoria nodded once. What kind? Amanda's smile returned. We'll start with everything. The answer drew another silence from the room. Even a teller behind the glass partition looked up. Victoria slowly exhaled and looked around the lounge. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She wasn't surprised either. What surprised her was how quickly it had happened. Less than 3 minutes after sitting down, she had already become a suspect in the eyes of the people responsible for serving her. Amanda folded her arms. Until we verify your claims, this withdrawal will not be processed. The room froze. The decision had been made. Not by evidence. Not by policy. By perception. And for the first time that morning, Victoria Brooks allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. Because Amanda Collins believed she was stopping a customer from accessing money. What she didn't know was that she had just begun a test she was destined to fail. Victoria Brooks held Amanda Collins's gaze for another second before looking away, not because she felt intimidated, but because she had already seen enough. The test had barely begun, and the results were arriving faster than she expected. Around her, the private client lounge slowly returned to motion. Coffee cups moved again. Phones came back into view. Conversations resumed in careful whispers. Yet the atmosphere had changed. Everyone could feel it. Amanda believed she had taken control of the situation. Victoria knew the opposite was true. She settled back into her chair and calmly folded the withdrawal request. 18 months earlier, Brooks Financial Group had completed one of the largest banking acquisitions in the Southeast. Industry analysts called it a transformative deal. Financial reporters called it historic. Competitors called it dangerous. Victoria had called it necessary. She had spent years building a reputation around one principle. People should never have to prove they deserve respect before receiving service. Policies could be taught. Procedures could be updated. Character was harder to measure. That was why she occasionally visited branches without notice. No executive team. No security detail. No press release. Just observation. Real behavior only appeared when nobody thought they were being watched. This morning, she had chosen Crescent National's flagship Charlotte branch. She wore simple clothes on purpose. The sweater was comfortable. The jeans were ordinary. The absence of status symbols was intentional. She wanted to see whether employees responded to people or appearances. Less than 15 minutes after arriving, she already had an answer. Across the room, Amanda quietly spoke with another employee. The banker nodded while glancing repeatedly toward Victoria. The whispers were subtle, but not subtle enough. Victoria noticed everything. She always had. That skill had helped her build a multi-billion-dollar financial empire from a small lending company founded nearly 2 decades earlier. She noticed hesitation. She noticed arrogance. She noticed fear. Most importantly, she noticed patterns. And what she was seeing now looked very familiar. A television mounted near the lounge ceiling displayed financial news. One of the headlines scrolling across the bottom mentioned Brooks Financial Group. No one seemed to connect the name to the woman sitting quietly beneath the screen. Victoria found that almost amusing. A retired attorney near the window studied her for a moment before returning to his newspaper. A young woman waiting for an appointment seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding nearby. Even some employees appeared uncertain. Not everyone in the branch agreed with Amanda's approach. The problem was that nobody had challenged it yet. Amanda returned to her desk carrying a tablet. Her expression suggested she had found something important. "I have reviewed your profile," she announced. "There are still several questions." Victoria nodded politely. Of course. Amanda seemed disappointed by the calm response. She had expected frustration. She had expected defensiveness. She had expected an argument. Instead, Victoria looked perfectly at ease, almost as if she knew something the rest of the room did not. In truth, she did. Because while Amanda was busy building a case against her, Victoria was evaluating every decision being made inside the branch. Every comment, every assumption, every choice. The withdrawal request had never been the real purpose of her visit. The real purpose was sitting directly across from her, holding a tablet and mistaking authority for judgment. And with every passing minute, Amanda Collins was unknowingly writing her own evaluation report. The questions started multiplying. Amanda Collins sat across from Victoria Brooks with the confidence of someone who believed she had already reached a conclusion and was now searching for evidence to support it. She tapped her tablet screen and frowned. "This account history is unusual." Victoria tilted her head slightly. "In what way?" Amanda glanced down again. "Large transfers. Significant assets. Multiple business entities." Victoria waited. Amanda finally looked up. "It does not match what I expected." The words hung in the air. Not what the account suggested. Not what the records showed. What she expected. Across the room, senior banker Ryan Mitchell approached carrying a folder. Amanda accepted it without taking her eyes off Victoria. Ryan was tall, polished, and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. He opened the folder and scanned several pages. "Everything verifies," he admitted quietly. Amanda's jaw tightened. "Everything." Ryan nodded. "The identification checks out. The account is active. The balance supports the request." For a moment, silence settled over the desk. Then Amanda asked the question that changed the atmosphere again. "Can you explain where the money came from?" Several nearby customers looked up immediately. Even Ryan seemed surprised by the wording. Victoria remained calm. "From my businesses." Amanda folded her arms. "Which businesses?" Victoria could feel the room leaning closer without physically moving. The retired attorney lowered his newspaper again. The young woman waiting for an appointment stopped scrolling through her phone. The tension had become impossible to ignore. Ryan examined the account profile once more. "There are dozens of companies attached to these records," he said. Amanda responded quickly. Then she should not have any problem explaining them. Victoria noticed the shift. The facts were no longer the issue. Every verification requested so far had supported her identity. Every system check had confirmed her account. Yet the suspicion remained. It was adapting, finding new forms, looking for another doorway. Amanda leaned forward. "We have a responsibility to protect this institution." Victoria nodded. "You do? Then you understand why we need additional review." Victoria looked directly at her. "No, I understand why you think you do." The answer landed softly, but several people heard it. Ryan's expression changed. For the first time, uncertainty appeared behind his professional smile. He looked back at the records. Numbers did not lie. Systems did not hesitate. Yet Amanda continued acting as though a problem existed. Near the far end of the lounge, a young banker named Emily Carter quietly watched the exchange. She had been reviewing customer files at a nearby workstation, but her attention kept returning to Victoria's profile. Something about the name seemed familiar. She opened an internal directory and froze. Her eyes moved from the screen to Victoria and back again. Then she checked a second database. The result was the same. Emily's pulse quickened. Meanwhile, Amanda continued pressing forward. Until further notice, this transaction will remain on hold. Victoria folded her hands and glanced around the room once more. She saw discomfort. She saw curiosity. She saw employees exchanging uncertain looks. Most of all, she saw people beginning to question what they were witnessing, because the evidence kept pointing in one direction while Amanda kept walking in another. And somewhere inside the branch, the first crack in the narrative had already begun to form. Emily Carter stared at her screen as if it had suddenly started speaking back to her. She checked the information a third time, then a fourth. The name was there. The account status was there. The executive clearance designation was there. Every internal record pointed to the same conclusion. Emily slowly stood from her workstation. Across the lounge, Amanda Collins was still speaking with confidence, still treating the situation as though she were protecting the bank from a problem. Ryan Mitchell remained beside her, holding the account file that had already confirmed everything they needed to know. Yet somehow the transaction remained frozen. The contradiction was becoming impossible to ignore. Emily took a step forward. Then another. "Amanda," she said carefully. The branch manager turned. "What is it?" Emily glanced toward Victoria before looking back at her supervisor. "I think we should review this profile again." Amanda frowned. "We already did." "I know," Emily replied. "But there are details that may be important." Amanda's expression hardened immediately. "Emily, return to your station." The younger banker hesitated. Around the lounge, several customers noticed the exchange. The young woman waiting for an appointment lowered her phone. The retired attorney folded his newspaper completely and set it aside. Nobody was pretending not to watch anymore. Emily swallowed and tried again. "I am just saying there may be information we are missing." Amanda's voice sharpened. "We are not missing anything." The answer came too quickly, too defensively. Ryan looked between the two employees. Even he seemed uncomfortable now. Victoria remained seated, observing quietly. The room felt different. The certainty Amanda had projected earlier was beginning to crack. People could sense it. They could hear it in her voice. Emily lowered her tone. "I checked multiple systems." Amanda stepped closer. "And I am telling you to stop." Silence spread across the lounge. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. It was the kind of silence that appears when people realize they are watching something important. Emily slowly nodded, but she did not sit down. That decision alone changed everything. Near the coffee station, a middle-aged woman finally spoke up. "Excuse me," she said. Every head turned. Has she actually done anything wrong? Amanda blinked. The question had not come from an employee. It had come from a customer. "This is an internal matter," Amanda replied. The woman folded her arms. "From where I am sitting, it looks like she provided identification, verified her account, and requested access to her own funds." A few customers nodded. Another man near the window added, "That is what it looks like to me too." The shift was subtle but unmistakable. The room was beginning to choose sides. Amanda noticed it immediately. Her posture stiffened. Ryan adjusted his tie and looked away. Emily felt a surge of relief. She was no longer the only person questioning what was happening. Victoria watched the reactions carefully. This was always the moment that interested her most. Not the policies, not the procedures, the people. The point where individuals decided whether to stay silent or speak up. Character revealed itself under pressure. It always did. Amanda looked around the lounge and realized she was losing control of the narrative. Customers were asking questions. Employees were hesitating. Doubt was spreading through the room like a slow-moving current. And standing quietly at the center of it all was Victoria Brooks, saying almost nothing, yet somehow becoming impossible to dismiss. The atmosphere inside the private client lounge had changed completely. What began as a routine transaction now felt like a public trial with no evidence and no clear accusation. Amanda Collins could feel the attention of the room slipping away from her. Customers were asking questions she did not want to answer. Employees were hesitating instead of obeying. Even Ryan Mitchell no longer looked certain. The pressure was growing, and pressure has a way of revealing what people truly believe. Amanda straightened her jacket and made a decision. "This meeting is over," she announced. "Your transaction will not be processed today." Victoria Brooks looked at her calmly. "On what basis?" Amanda did not answer immediately. She searched for a reason that sounded official enough to hide the real one. "We have concerns regarding the request." Victoria nodded slowly. "Concerns that every verification system has failed to support." Amanda's expression tightened. The customers nearest the desk exchanged looks. The retired attorney near the window shook his head slightly. He had spent decades around contracts, regulations, and compliance reviews. He knew the difference between caution and prejudice. So did everyone else in the room. Ryan cleared his throat. "Amanda, perhaps we should escalate the review to corporate support before making a final decision." Amanda turned sharply toward him. "That will not be necessary." The answer came too quickly. Emily Carter lowered her eyes to her screen again. The executive designation was still there. The ownership hierarchy was still there. The information had not changed. Only Amanda's willingness to see it had. Then came the moment that pushed everything past the point of recovery. Amanda reached for the desk phone and pressed a button. "Robert, can you come to the private lounge?" Several heads turned. Victoria remained perfectly still. Less than a minute later, security lead Robert Kane entered through a side door. He was a professional in his early 50s with a calm demeanor and years of experience. The moment he walked into the room, he sensed the tension. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked. Amanda gestured toward Victoria. "This customer is refusing to cooperate with our review process." Robert looked at Victoria. Then he looked at the stack of verified documents sitting on Amanda's desk. Something did not add up. Before he could speak, Amanda continued. "We may need assistance escorting her from the lounge." The words landed heavily across the room. Several customers immediately reacted. "For what?" the woman near the coffee station asked. "She has done nothing wrong," another customer added. The room was no longer silent. People were speaking openly now. Amanda ignored them. Victoria slowly lifted her eyes toward Robert. She did not appear angry. She appeared disappointed. And somehow that felt heavier. Her gaze drifted beyond the room for a moment. 21 years earlier, she had stood inside a small lending office in Atlanta seeking financing for her first commercial property. She still remembered the loan officer studying her application and then studying her face. She remembered being told that people like her rarely succeeded in projects of that size. She remembered leaving the building with rejection papers in her hand and determination in her heart. The faces were different now. The building was different. The language was more polished. But the feeling was exactly the same. Victoria returned her attention to the present. Around her, customers were questioning the decision. Employees were exchanging uneasy looks. Robert Kane stood frozen between policy and common sense. And for the first time all morning, Amanda Collins looked less like someone in control and more like someone desperately trying not to lose it. Robert Kane looked from Amanda Collins to Victoria Brooks and then to the customers now openly questioning what was happening. Years in security had taught him something simple. Real problems usually created noise. Real fraud usually created panic. The woman sitting in front of him displayed neither. Victoria remained calm, composed, almost detached from the tension surrounding her. That alone made him hesitate. Amanda noticed it immediately. "Robert, I need you to assist with removing her from the lounge," she said. Robert did not move. "Has she violated any policy?" Amanda's expression darkened. "She is refusing to cooperate." Several customers reacted at once. "That is not true," the woman near the coffee station said. "We have all been listening." Another customer nodded. "Every document has checked out." The room was no longer following Amanda's lead. It was evaluating her. Ryan Mitchell shifted uncomfortably beside the desk. Emily Carter stared at her monitor, her heart beating faster by the second. She knew what she had found in the system. She knew Amanda was ignoring information that should have ended this entire situation 20 minutes ago. Victoria slowly reached into her handbag and removed her phone. The movement was small, almost forgettable, yet it caught Emily's attention immediately. Victoria unlocked the screen and typed a brief message. No emotion crossed her face. No dramatic speech followed. No threat. No warning. Just a message. Somewhere 20 floors above the Charlotte skyline, inside the executive offices of Brooks Financial Group, Monica Hayes looked down at her phone. The notification appeared instantly. 3 words. Protocol 7. Monica sat upright. She had worked beside Victoria for 11 years. She understood exactly what those words meant. Within seconds, she opened a secure corporate dashboard. Compliance received an alert. Internal audit received an alert. Legal counsel received an alert. Executive oversight received an alert. Multiple departments suddenly began monitoring activity connected to Crescent National's flagship branch. Back inside the lounge, nobody noticed the invisible machinery beginning to move. Amanda was still focused on winning an argument she should never have started. "You are making this much more difficult than it needs to be," she told Victoria. Victoria slipped her phone back into her bag. "No," she replied calmly. "I am letting people make their own decisions." The answer confused Amanda. It unsettled Ryan. It intrigued the customers. Emily glanced at her screen again. Then she noticed something new. A compliance notification had appeared across the branch network. Audit monitoring active. Her eyes widened. The timing could not be a coincidence. Across the room, Robert folded his hands in front of him. "I am not seeing grounds for removal," he said carefully. Amanda stared at him. "Excuse me. She is seated. She is cooperative. She has provided identification." The words landed like stones in still water. Customers exchanged approving looks. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. Amanda suddenly found herself standing alone. The room felt different now. The pressure had shifted directions. It was no longer pressing against Victoria. It was pressing against everyone who had questioned her. And while Amanda continued searching for authority, she no longer seemed to possess. Invisible eyes were already watching every decision being made inside the branch. Victoria sat quietly beneath the television screen, patient as ever. She did not need to raise her voice. She did not need to defend herself. The counterattack had already begun, and nobody in the lounge knew just how far it had reached. The notification arrived without warning. A soft tone echoed from Amanda Collins's tablet. Then another. Ryan Mitchell's computer chimed. Across the branch, several employee screens refreshed simultaneously. Amanda frowned and glanced down. Her confidence wavered for the first time all morning. "What is this?" she muttered. Emily Carter already knew. The compliance alert she had seen minutes earlier had expanded into something much larger. Executive Oversight Review active. Branch activity under observation. Her stomach tightened. Around the lounge, customers noticed the sudden change in employee behavior. Bankers were checking screens. Managers were whispering into headsets. The calm certainty that had fueled Amanda's decisions was beginning to disappear. Victoria Brooks remained seated exactly where she had been all morning. The difference was that now everyone else seemed uncomfortable. Amanda tapped her tablet repeatedly. This must be some kind of mistake. Ryan looked over her shoulder. His face lost color. "Amanda." She ignored him. "Not now. Amanda." His voice was firmer this time. She turned. Ryan pointed toward the screen. The room watched as Amanda's expression changed. Confusion became concern. Concern became disbelief. Across the lounge, Robert Kane noticed it too. The branch manager who had spent the entire morning acting completely certain suddenly looked unsure of everything. Emily slowly stood again. She could not stay silent any longer. "I tried to tell you," she said quietly. Amanda looked up sharply. "Tell me what?" Emily swallowed. Every eye in the room seemed to shift toward her. "The profile." Amanda stared at her. "What about it?" Emily took a breath. "You never reviewed the executive ownership hierarchy." Silence. Complete silence. Ryan closed the account file. Robert folded his arms. Even the customers seemed frozen. Amanda's face hardened. "What are you talking about?" Emily turned her monitor slightly. "The account holder is listed under executive ownership clearance." Amanda laughed nervously. "That does not mean anything." Emily shook her head. "Yes, it does." Victoria watched quietly. The room felt suspended in time. Nobody wanted to blink. Nobody wanted to interrupt. Amanda stepped toward Emily's workstation. Her eyes moved across the screen. Then she stopped. The color drained from her face. Ryan leaned forward and saw it too. His mouth opened slightly. Robert glanced at the display. A customer near the window stood up entirely. Amanda looked back at Victoria. For the first time all morning, she seemed unable to find words. Victoria slowly rose from her chair. The movement was small, but the effect was enormous. The entire lounge seemed to straighten with her. She adjusted her sweater and calmly looked around the room. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. You questioned my identity. Nobody moved. You questioned my account. Amanda remained frozen. You questioned my right to access my own funds. Ryan lowered his eyes. Emily stood motionless beside her workstation. Victoria's gaze settled on Amanda. You denied a withdrawal request from the woman who owns this bank. The sentence landed with the force of absolute truth. No shouting. No anger. No theatrics. Just reality. The room stopped breathing. Amanda stared at her as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Ryan looked away. Robert's eyes widened. Several customers exchanged stunned glances. The television overhead continued broadcasting financial news, unaware that the biggest story in the building was standing directly beneath it. Victoria remained calm. She always had been. The difference now was that everyone finally understood why. Amanda Collins looked as though the room had tilted beneath her. A few minutes earlier, she had controlled every conversation. Now she could barely hold eye contact. The silence that followed Victoria Brooks's revelation stretched across the lounge like a held breath. Then the notification started. Amanda's tablet emitted a sharp tone. Ryan. Mitchell's workstation flashed. Several employee terminals refreshed simultaneously. This time nobody ignored it. Ryan looked down first. His expression changed immediately. Amanda, he said quietly. She did not respond. Her attention remained fixed on Victoria. Amanda, he repeated. She finally looked at the screen. Executive Oversight Directive. Immediate Personnel Review. Active Access Audit. The words seemed to drain the remaining confidence from her posture. Across the branch, employees began checking their credentials. Managers whispered into headsets. The invisible machinery that Victoria had activated earlier was now moving in full view. Robert Kane's security tablet vibrated. He opened the message and stared. His eyes widened. Emily Carter received the same alert seconds later. Corporate audit teams had entered the branch systems remotely. Activity logs were being reviewed in real time. Decision histories were being examined. Customer interactions were being documented. Every choice made that morning now existed as a permanent record. Amanda looked toward Ryan as though searching for support. Instead, he slowly stepped away from her desk. The account was verified from the beginning, he said quietly. The statement was not dramatic. It was worse. It was factual. Several customers exchanged looks. The woman near the coffee station shook her head. So all of this could have been avoided? Nobody answered because everyone already knew the answer. Victoria remained calm. She did not celebrate. She did not gloat. She simply watched. The room had spent nearly an hour judging her based on assumptions. Now those assumptions were collapsing under the weight of facts. Another notification appeared. Amanda opened it with trembling hands. Her access privileges had been temporarily suspended pending review. She stared at the screen in disbelief. Ryan's profile showed a compliance interview request. Not disciplinary action. Not yet. Review. Investigation. Accountability. Robert received updated instructions from executive oversight. Observe. Document. Preserve records. The retired attorney near the window smiled faintly. He had seen enough corporate investigations to understand exactly what was happening. This was not chaos. This was process. Emily looked toward Victoria with a mixture of admiration and relief. For the first time all morning, she no longer felt trapped between loyalty and truth. The truth was standing right in front of everyone. Amanda finally found her voice. I did not know who you were. Victoria's expression remained steady. That was never the problem. The answer landed harder than any accusation. Customers nodded. Ryan lowered his eyes again. Even Amanda seemed to understand the meaning. Not knowing her title was understandable. The treatment she received before anyone knew it was not. Another employee terminal flashed red. Temporary restrictions were being applied across management accounts connected to the incident review. The branch that had seemed untouchable an hour earlier now felt exposed under a spotlight. Victoria looked around the lounge one final time. The customers who had spoken up stood a little taller. Emily no longer looked afraid. Robert appeared relieved. And Amanda Collins, once certain she was protecting the institution, was now confronting the reality that the institution had been watching her all along. The private client lounge felt strangely quiet after the flood of notifications stopped. The tension that had dominated the room all morning was gone, replaced by something else. Reflection. Reality. Consequences. Nobody seemed eager to speak first. Victoria Brooks looked around the branch one last time. The marble floors were the same. The polished desks were the same. The expensive artwork hanging on the walls was the same. Yet the room felt completely different from the moment she had walked through the doors. Sometimes a place changed not because the building changed, but because the people inside finally saw themselves clearly. Amanda Collins stood beside her desk staring at the darkened screen of her tablet. The certainty she had carried all morning had vanished. Ryan Mitchell remained silent nearby, processing every decision that had led them here. Robert Kane looked relieved that common sense had finally caught up with authority. And Emily Carter stood quietly at her workstation, knowing she had made the right choice when it would have been easier to stay silent. The customers who had spoken up earlier slowly began gathering their things. A few smiled at Victoria as they passed. The woman near the coffee station nodded respectfully. The retired attorney folded his newspaper and approached before leaving. "Character always shows up eventually," he said. Victoria smiled. "It usually does." He nodded once and walked away. One by one, the witnesses to the morning's events returned to their lives. Yet everyone leaving the branch carried the same lesson with them. Appearances could mislead. Assumptions could fail. Respect should never depend on status. Amanda finally looked up. "I truly did not know." Victoria met her eyes. There was no anger in her expression, no triumph, no desire to humiliate. "Most people did not know," she replied. "That was never the test." Amanda lowered her gaze. For the first time, she seemed to understand. Victoria stepped away from the desk and slowly walked toward the center of the lounge. Every employee watched. Even the conversations happening elsewhere in the branch seemed to pause. Her voice remained calm and steady. "You thought I was a problem because of how I looked. You questioned my identity because I did not fit your expectations. But the real issue was never who I was." The room listened carefully. The real issue was how easily some people decide who deserves respect. Nobody interrupted. Nobody looked away. Victoria continued. "Titles are temporary. Wealth can change. Positions come and go. Character is what remains when none of those things are visible." The words settled across the room. Simple, direct, impossible to dismiss. She glanced toward Emily. "Thank you for paying attention to the facts." Emily smiled nervously. "I just did what was right." Victoria nodded. "That is how change starts." She then looked toward Robert. "Thank you for choosing judgment over assumptions." Robert offered a respectful nod in return. Finally, Victoria turned toward the exit. Sunlight streamed through the glass entrance, bright and warm against the polished floor. She paused before leaving and looked back one final time. "I did not come here to test policy," she said. "I came here to test character." The lounge remained silent. And character always reveals itself when nobody thinks it matters. With that, Victoria walked toward the doors. No applause followed. No dramatic celebration. None was necessary. The lesson was already written across every face in the room. As the doors closed behind her, the branch returned to business. But it would never be the same branch again. Because on an ordinary Tuesday morning, a woman had walked in dressed like nobody special, and by the time she left, everyone had learned that dignity should never require a title, an account balance, or a position of power. It should have been there from the beginning.